Rebecca Manning felt the weight in her stomach shift again as her phone lit up for the 8th time in under an hour. Mom, the screen read, just like the last 7 missed calls. She stared at it from across her small kitchen table, unmoving, as if ignoring it long enough might dissolve it into nothing. But the knot inside her only tightened. Outside the window, December in Portland wore its usual gray, cold, drizzly, and quiet. Inside, her tiny studio apartment smelled faintly of instant coffee and rosemary oil, a scent she used to calm herself. And today, she needed it more than ever. She picked up her coffee, now lukewarm, and sat down. Her fingers hesitated before unlocking the screen. 7 missed calls, all from her mother, Debbie. There was a time when Rebecca would have called back immediately, would have apologized for being busy, would have asked if everything was okay, would have listened as her mother layered guilt into every sentence like it was a family recipe. But not this year. Not anymore. At 28, Rebecca was finally living on her own terms. She had landed a full-time copywriting position at a local ad agency 6 months ago. Tough hours, tighter deadlines, but it paid the rent. More importantly, it gave her back something she hadn't had in years: her time. No more running errands for her parents. No more last-minute babysitting because you don't have kids, so it's easier for you. No more guilt obligations masquerading as love. Still, she picked up the phone. You finally picked up. Her mother's voice chimed in without greeting, edged with faux concern and real impatience. I've been calling you all morning. I was at work, Mom, Rebecca lied. She had seen the calls an hour earlier, but just couldn't bring herself to deal with the drama yet. A pause. Then, so, what are your plans for Christmas? Rebecca blinked. Same as always, I guess. I'll drive down Christmas morning and be back in the evening. Oh, her mom said, her voice dropping an octave into that syrupy register Rebecca had learned to dread. Well, this year is going to be a little different. There it was. Debbie launched into it like it was the most wonderful idea anyone had ever heard. Your Aunt Sandra and I planned something amazing. We're all going on a Caribbean cruise. 10 days, sunshine, cocktails, the whole family. Rebecca sat up straight. Wait, what? All of us are going, Debbie said breezily. It's Sandra's idea, really. But we all agreed it would be good to escape the cold this year. It's from the 24th through New Year's. Rebecca's heart sank. And me? A pause. Well, you'll have a slightly different role. Rebecca's stomach clenched again. What role? You'll be watching Nicole, Chris, and Alex, her mother replied, like it was the most natural thing in the world. They're too young for a cruise, and they love you. Plus, you're so good with kids. Rebecca's hand tightened around her mug. You want me to take care of an 11-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 4-year-old for over a week, while the rest of you party on a beach? Don't say it like that, Debbie tooted. You get along with them. And it's not like you have your own children. This will be good experience for you. The audacity struck Rebecca like a slap. Mom, I have my own life. I made plans with friends. I have deadlines to meet. You never even ask me. But it's for the family. Besides, the tickets are non-refundable, Debbie said, as though Rebecca's own schedule was nothing more than an unfortunate inconvenience. Rebecca's voice turned cold. When exactly were you planning to tell me? Or did you just assume I'd be grateful to be used again? Rebecca, don't be dramatic. You've always been the responsible one. We didn't think you'd say no. You've always done what's best for everyone else. I'm not a child anymore, she replied firmly. And I'm saying no. There was a pause, a rare, dangerous pause on the other end. Rebecca, don't just think about yourself, Debbie finally said, her voice hardening. This is supposed to be a special time for the whole family. Rebecca let the silence stretch, then answered slowly, except for me. Everyone else gets a vacation. I get a job I didn't ask for. Her mother's voice now snapped. I can't believe your selfishness is ruining everything for us. Rebecca's voice remained calm. You're the ones who made plans without even checking with me. That's not family. That's manipulation. That's enough, Debbie snapped. I'll get your father to call you. Maybe you'll listen to him. Maybe I won't, Rebecca replied and hung up. That night, she lay awake in bed, her phone buzzing every 30 minutes, texts from her dad, her mom, even her Uncle Richard. One of them read simply, "Rebecca, won't you think about the family?" She stared at it for a moment, then burst out laughing. In my family, thinking about the family always meant sacrificing myself. A few days passed. Rebecca ignored most of the calls, letting them pile up like unopened bills. It was always the same. Her mother's guilt-laced voicemails, her father's awkward attempts at mediation, her aunt's fake concern. But on Wednesday night, as she left the office late and walked through the wet streets of Portland under flickering Christmas lights, her phone rang again. And this time she picked up. "Rebecca," her dad's voice said, calm and practiced like always. James Manning had mastered the art of sounding reasonable, even when what he was saying was anything but, "Hi, Dad. We just want to talk," he said, "not argue." "I've said no already," she replied, her voice flat. "I know. I understand. But what if we adjust things a little?" Rebecca paused. "Adjust? You're right. You shouldn't have to babysit for a whole week. That was unfair. But maybe you could just come for Christmas morning? The kids miss you. You could bring your gifts, stay for brunch, and then leave. No expectations. I promise." Rebecca didn't answer right away. The idea felt almost reasonable. It gave her a way out, a boundary she could control. "I'd just come for a few hours?" she asked. "Yes," her father said quickly. "Just a few hours. You don't even have to stay for dinner." Rebecca exhaled. "All right, I'll come Christmas morning. But that's it." "Thank you, sweetie," he said, with a relief that sounded almost too eager. "The kids will be thrilled." She hung up and stood there on the sidewalk for a moment, watching her breath mist in the cold air. Something still felt off, but she couldn't place it. That night, over a glass of wine, Rebecca told her best friend Gina what had happened. "They backed down," she said. "Kind of." Gina raised an eyebrow. "They never back down. They pivot." Rebecca smiled grimly. "You think it's a trap?" "I think it's them. Of course it's a trap. But I agreed to visit, just for a few hours." Gina leaned forward. "Then hold that line. No matter what happens, don't stay. Don't bend. They only understand boundaries when they hit one." Rebecca nodded slowly. "You're right, it's just hard." "Of course it is," Gina said. "They're your family. That's why they know exactly where to press." On Christmas Eve, Rebecca finished wrapping gifts late into the night. She had carefully picked something for each child, a new box set of fantasy novels for Nicole, a complex Lego spaceship for Chris, and a plush dragon for little Alex. He had pointed it out months ago at a store, and she remembered. At 11:02 p.m., she texted her mom, "I'll arrive around 11 tomorrow morning. Merry Christmas." The reply came within seconds. "Understood. Looking forward to seeing you." Rebecca stared at the message. It was too short, too polite. It didn't sound like her mother at all. Still, she smiled. This year felt different. For once, she had set the terms. No guilt, no compromises, just a simple visit on her schedule. She loaded the car with the carefully wrapped gifts and fell asleep to the soft hum of holiday music from the radio. For the first time in years, she actually felt calm about Christmas. The next morning, Portland was blanketed in a soft drizzle, and the streets glistened like glass. Rebecca slipped into her coat, started the car, and headed south toward Salem. The highway was mostly clear. Christmas songs played gently as she hummed along and tapped her fingers on the steering wheel. Today will be good, she told herself. A short visit, hand out the presents, smile for the kids, and then back home. She pulled into the familiar driveway at 10:59 a.m. The house looked festive. Garlands on the porch, a wreath on the door, and lights blinking from inside. But something was wrong. Her parents' car wasn't there. Neither was Aunt Sandra's. No sign of Uncle Richard's pickup either. Rebecca frowned. Maybe they'd gone out to pick something up? She stepped out, arms full of gifts, and rang the bell. Tiny footsteps echoed from within. The door swung open, and there stood Nicole, beaming. "Rebecca! You came!" Rebecca's face softened. "Of course I did. Merry Christmas, sweetie." Nicole hugged her, then grabbed one of the bags. "Come in. We've been waiting." Rebecca walked in and froze. The living room was quiet. No adults in sight. A few half-eaten pancakes sat on plates in the kitchen. Christmas stockings were hung neatly, but the only sounds came from the children's excited chatter. "Where is everyone?" Rebecca asked slowly. Nicole blinked. "They left." Rebecca crouched to her level. "Left where?" "The airport," Nicole said matter-of-factly. "They're going on that big boat. Mommy said you were coming to stay with us." Rebecca's heart dropped. Chris and Alex ran out from the hallway, hugging her legs. "Did you bring presents?" Rebecca forced a smile. Yes, I did." But inside her mind raced. "They tricked me, they actually did it." On the kitchen table sat a folded sheet of paper. Rebecca walked over and unfolded it with trembling hands. "To Rebecca. We left on the 9 a.m. flight. We prepared breakfast. There's a week's worth of meals in the fridge. Alex to bed at 7 p.m., Nicole and Chris at 8:30. Emergency contacts are on the fridge. With love, Mom." Rebecca stood there, the note in one hand, the other clenched at her side. Her face was burning. Her jaw tightened. They didn't just ignore her boundaries. They orchestrated a lie. They weaponized her own goodness against her. She took a deep breath, walked into the kitchen, and picked up her phone. Her mother answered on the third ring. "Oh, Rebecca! You arrived? How are the kids?" "What were you thinking?" Rebecca asked, her voice low, trembling with fury. "Now, don't start. How could you do this to me? After I said no." "Calm down, honey. We knew you'd come. You're responsible. We trust you." Rebecca's voice turned to ice. "I'm not your babysitter. I said I would come for Christmas morning, not this." "You're already there," her mother said. "You can't just leave them alone." Rebecca stared at the children, giggling behind her. "Do you realize this is child neglect? If I called the police right now, do you think they'd agree with you?" Her mother gasped. "You wouldn't try me," Rebecca said. "You have 1 hour. Cancel the flight. Come home, or my next call will be to the police." "Wait, we're still at the airport. 1 hour," Rebecca repeated and hung up. Rebecca placed the phone down on the counter and closed her eyes for a moment. Her heart was thudding against her rib cage, a quiet thunder of betrayal and adrenaline. In the living room, the children were tearing open gift wrap with delight, oblivious to the emotional warfare swirling around them. She walked back in and crouched beside them. "Hey," she said gently, "your parents will be back soon, okay? But for now, let's have some fun together. What do you say?" Nicole grinned, holding up the books Rebecca had brought. "Can you read to us later?" "Of course," Rebecca smiled. She sat with them on the floor, played board games, built Lego towers, and helped Alex feed his new stuffed dragon imaginary cookies. Every time she glanced at the clock, a quiet tension stirred in her gut. 40 minutes left, 35. The silence outside the house seemed too calm, too rehearsed, like a stage where betrayal had already played out and no one had taken down the set. At the 45-minute mark, Rebecca stood by the window. Her body was still, her hands folded over one another, her thumb pressed absently against her palm. Part of her hoped they wouldn't come, so she could follow through with the threat. Another part hoped they would, just to prove they'd finally understood she was serious. Then, at minute 50, she saw the first car. It was her father's silver SUV, pulling into the driveway. Behind it came Aunt Sandra's van, and then the unmistakable cherry red pickup that belonged to Uncle Richard. She didn't move from the window. She watched the doors swing open, watched them step out hurriedly, their faces tight with tension. James, Debbie, Sandra, Richard, all of them here. Just like that, the children ran to the door. "They're back!" Nicole shouted. Rebecca stepped aside. The door burst open with excitement, and the kids jumped into their parents' arms. Debbie entered last, walking toward Rebecca slowly. "Rebecca! I don't need an explanation," Rebecca cut her off. "I'm leaving." "But it's Christmas," Debbie said, voice trembling just enough to play the part. Rebecca looked her dead in the eye. "Now I know what I am to you. A tool, a convenience, not a daughter." Debbie's mouth opened, then closed. Her face paled. Rebecca bent down to hug the children. "I'm glad you liked your gifts," she said softly. "Be good, okay?" They nodded, eyes wide, sensing something had shifted, but not understanding how deeply. She slipped through the back door before any of the adults could follow. Outside, the wind was sharper than before. Her breath came out in white puffs as she climbed into her car. Her fingers trembled against the steering wheel. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even speak. But as she reversed out of the driveway, she saw something through the window. James was yelling. At Debbie. At Sandra. At Richard. For the first time, he wasn't the passive father who quietly supported Debbie's schemes. He was angry, visibly, loudly angry. Rebecca didn't stop to listen. She drove, all the way back to Portland. When she reached her apartment that evening, the sky had already turned a soft navy blue. She poured herself a glass of wine, lit a lavender candle, and curled up on the couch without turning on the lights. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock and the occasional honk from the street below. Peace, not joy, not triumph, just stillness. She didn't answer any more calls that night. Her phone lit up over and over. James, Debbie, even Sandra. She let them all go to voicemail. She had said what needed to be said. But the war wasn't over. The next morning, Rebecca opened her phone out of habit. She hadn't expected what came next. A post on Facebook from her mother. It was a sad Christmas this year. Some people don't value family. The kids were disappointed. Plans were ruined. It hurts to know someone would rather prioritize themselves over love. I never thought our family bond could be so fragile. Rebecca stared at the screen. Her hands started to shake. She scrolled down, hundreds of comments. "So sad, Debbie. You raised her better than that. What happened to loyalty these days? You gave her so much, and she couldn't even give 1 week. Shameful. The younger generation has no sense of duty." Rebecca took a screenshot, then another, and another. The rage came slowly, like a tide crawling over everything. She wasn't even named in the post, but it was unmistakable. Her own mother had painted her as the villain, publicly, falsely, cruelly, and people were eating it up. That was the final straw. She opened her laptop, logged into Facebook. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time. Then she began to type. "Since it seems necessary to tell the whole story, let me set the record straight. Since it seems necessary to tell the whole story, let me set the record straight." That was the first line of Rebecca's post. She didn't draft it. She didn't overthink it. She just typed from a place deep inside her chest, a place made of old bruises and quiet sacrifices. Yesterday, I visited my parents' house for Christmas. I had agreed, after repeated pressure, to stop by for a short morning visit. But when I arrived, I found no adults, only 3 children and a written note informing me that my parents, my aunt, and my uncle had already left for vacation, expecting me to care for their children for over a week. This, despite my repeated and clear refusal. I threatened to call the police for child abandonment. They returned only when faced with the possibility of legal consequences. Now I'm being accused of ruining the holiday. In reality, I simply chose not to be manipulated. Family is not built on exploitation, and I will not apologize for drawing a line. She attached photos of the handwritten note. She included a screenshot of her mother's text. Understood. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. She posted it publicly, and she hit post. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, Gina commented, "You did the right thing." Then came another message, and another, from co-workers, from distant cousins, from strangers. Then came the shares. Within an hour, the post had over 300 reactions. That night, it had over 1,000. By morning, it had been shared to private groups, women's forums, parenting communities, even Reddit. Some people left short comments. "You are not alone." "My sister did this to me once. Never again." "Blood doesn't equal respect." Others wrote paragraphs, full stories of Christmases ruined, of being the responsible one, of years spent putting everyone else first, until they broke. Rebecca sat on her couch, her knees tucked beneath her, reading comment after comment, overwhelmed by the outpouring of solidarity. And then, something she hadn't expected, a comment from her grandfather. "Rebecca, can you give me a call when you have a moment? We need to talk." Her fingers trembled slightly. She clicked into the comment. It was public. Everyone could see that he had spoken up. Moments later, her grandmother commented as well. "Debbie, James, Sandra, Richard, I am deeply disappointed. You owe Rebecca an apology, publicly." Rebecca gasped softly. Her grandparents, her father's parents, had always been quiet observers. Kind, gentle, but rarely involved in the family drama. But this time they had chosen a side, and it was hers. She called her grandfather immediately. "Rebecca," he answered, voice warm but firm. "That was rough." "Yeah," she whispered. "I didn't know what else to do." "I spoke to your grandmother," he said. "We agree. Your mother's behavior, and that of Sandra and Richard, was unacceptable. You were treated like a servant. It's been going on for too long." "They're making me out to be the villain," she said quietly, "and people are listening." "They're wrong," Frank Manning replied. "You did what none of them had the courage to do. You stood up." A few minutes later, her grandmother called too. Then a cousin she hadn't spoken to in years. Then a friend of her aunt's, privately of course, saying, "I always wondered why they leaned on you so much." But just as the support flooded in, so did the backlash. Her mother posted again, this time more pointed. "Social media is not the place to air family matters. Some people choose to humiliate their loved ones rather than resolve things privately." Her father emailed her, "Rebecca, we did apologize, but threatening legal action was too far. You embarrassed this family. You crossed a line." Sandra and Richard posted passive-aggressive quotes about entitlement and the death of respect. Then came the private messages from cousins she hadn't heard from in years. "Why are you doing this? You've always been so quiet. This doesn't seem like you. You're blowing everything out of proportion." Rebecca didn't respond. Instead, she turned off her phone, logged off her accounts, and sat in silence. She didn't cry. She didn't feel sorry. She just felt hollow, and also free. The next morning, Gina called. "Rebecca, your post is everywhere." Rebecca rubbed her eyes. "What do you mean, everywhere?" Some blogs picked it up. Screenshots are on Twitter. People are sharing it as a story about setting boundaries. "You've gone viral." Rebecca blinked. "I didn't want to go viral." "I know," Gina said softly, "but sometimes the truth doesn't ask for permission. It just resonates." That afternoon, as she sat drinking tea and reading messages from strangers, another notification arrived. A new post from her mother. "I want to clarify my previous message. It was written in anger and did not reflect the full story. My daughter Rebecca was placed in an unfair position. My husband, my brother-in-law, and I made assumptions. We did not respect her boundaries. Her reaction was justified. "I sincerely apologize." Rebecca stared at the screen, speechless. A public apology. From her mother. Unthinkable. But just as quickly as hope flickered, her phone buzzed again. A text. From Grandpa Frank. "Debbie and I talked. Her apology is a start, but it's not enough. This has gone on for too long. Rebecca, I think we should explore legal options. Not to punish, but to protect." Rebecca froze. Legal options? She had barely recovered from the emotional damage. And now this? But then she opened her inbox. An email. From her father. "Rebecca, your behavior is unacceptable. Publicly threatening to call the police was immature and extreme. Your actions embarrass the family. We will no longer be inviting you to future gatherings." Her jaw clenched. So that's what the apology had been. Not remorse. Just damage control. She picked up the phone and called her grandfather. "Grandpa," she said, her voice tight. "Dad just emailed me. He's still blaming me." There was silence on the line. Then, "This is harassment. It's time you speak to a lawyer." Rebecca nodded slowly. "Okay, I will." The law office of Vanessa Gale sat in a modest brick building in downtown Portland, just a few blocks from where Rebecca worked. It didn't look like much, no glitzy lobby, no glass conference rooms, but there was a sense of quiet certainty to it, a space that told you you're safe here. Rebecca sat across from Vanessa, a woman in her late 30s with sharp eyes and a voice like polished steel. She had listened quietly for nearly 45 minutes as Rebecca laid out the full timeline. The manipulated Christmas invitation, the abandonment of children, the public posts, the backlash, the private threats. When Rebecca finished, her voice dry and worn, Vanessa folded her hands. "Ms. Manning," she began calmly, "this is not just a messy family drama. What you've described is emotional exploitation, public defamation, and digital harassment. And in my legal opinion, it has crossed every line." Rebecca blinked. "But they're my family." Vanessa didn't flinch. "That doesn't exempt them from consequences." Rebecca looked down at her hands. "Should I really sue my own parents?" Vanessa leaned forward slightly. "This isn't about punishment. It's about protection. If you don't draw a legal boundary now, they'll continue. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next Christmas, but it will come back. Because people like this, they don't stop when you ask. They stop when you make them." Rebecca didn't answer. Not yet. So Vanessa continued. "The public post from your mother implies false behavior. Combined with her status in the PDA and community organizations, it carries weight, reputation-wise. That's defamation. The pressure to accept childcare after a clear refusal, and the strategic manipulation to trap you inside that situation, that's coercive. And the repeated messaging. The email from your father excluding you from the family? Harassment." Rebecca sat in silence for a long while. Then she said, "Let's start with a warning letter, just to see if they take it seriously." Vanessa nodded. "We'll draft it today. I'll list every action taken against you. If they don't respond appropriately, we escalate." Within 48 hours, the letter was sent, certified, signed, and undeniable. Rebecca hoped it would be enough. It wasn't. The reply came not from a lawyer, but from her father. Another email. "Rebecca, we saw your letter. This is ridiculous. We already apologized publicly. If you go forward with this, it will destroy our family permanently. We're not the villains here. You are. You embarrassed us. You escalated. We will not tolerate being slandered by our own daughter." That night, Rebecca brought the email to Vanessa. Vanessa read it slowly, carefully. Then she looked up. "This is gaslighting in written form," she said. "And now that you've formally warned them and they've responded with further blame and denial, we move forward." Rebecca nodded, lips pressed tight. "File it," she said. "We sue." In the following days, paperwork was filed, statements were drafted, and Rebecca was prepared for the emotional toll that was coming. But nothing could have prepared her for the silence. The family didn't respond publicly anymore. They stopped commenting, stopped posting. Even the flying monkeys, the cousins, the family friends went quiet. But Rebecca's inbox stayed full. Support from strangers, from other daughters, from women in their 30s and 50s and 70s who had carried the same burden for decades but never spoken aloud. Your courage helped me confront my own mother. I thought I was crazy. Now I know I was just controlled. I wish I had drawn a line years ago, like you did. Rebecca cried, quietly reading them, not because of the pain, but because of the recognition. 3 weeks later, the court date arrived. Inside the courtroom, everything looked so ordinary, wood paneling, dull carpeting, a flickering overhead light. But to Rebecca, it felt like standing on a cliff. Her lawyer presented everything, the pattern of emotional control, the screenshots, the messages, the public backlash. The testimony from her grandparents was particularly damning. Rebecca has always been expected to sacrifice for the rest of the family, her grandfather said steadily. Since she was a child, they treated her like help, not like a daughter. And this Christmas was just the latest betrayal. The judge listened silently for over an hour. Then he looked up. The actions of Debbie Manning, James Manning, Sandra Miller, and Richard Miller constituted a sustained emotional campaign of coercion, neglect, and harassment. The court finds that Ms. Rebecca Manning suffered reputational damage, emotional distress, and social alienation as a direct result of these actions. He continued, family relationships do not justify exploitation. They do not override consent, and they do not exempt cruelty. Rebecca's breath caught. She had won. The verdict rippled like a silent explosion through the entire family tree. Debbie was forced to resign from the PDA board. Public pressure had mounted after the court decision was posted online. Parents in the community no longer trusted her. Not with children, not with leadership, not with anything. The polished suburban image she had curated over the years, gone, shattered in a week. James Manning, who had once been the pillar of quiet complicity, was now a man people avoided at neighborhood barbecues and church. The look in his eyes, Rebecca would hear later, wasn't anger. It was shame, a kind he didn't know how to carry. Sandra and Richard, their artisan home goods store in Salem began hemorrhaging customers. People whispered. The screenshots of their smug Facebook posts, the timeline of events, Rebecca's public court statements, all of it had turned into quiet, deadly PR poison. Within 6 months, they shuttered the store. Bankruptcy followed. But Rebecca didn't celebrate. She didn't post a follow-up, didn't gloat. She simply moved on. Her agency promoted her in March, creative lead for a regional campaign. Her salary nearly doubled. She moved into a slightly larger apartment with a small balcony that overlooked downtown. She planted rosemary in a hanging pot, just like the one from her childhood. But this time the scent was hers. One warm afternoon in May, Rebecca walked out of a family law seminar she'd been invited to speak at. Yes, invited. Her story had reached not just thousands online, but lawyers, advocacy groups, writers, women. As she sipped iced coffee in the sun, Gina sat across from her, grinning. Do you realize what you've done? Rebecca tilted her head. Filed a lawsuit. Gina laughed. You lit a fuse. And now women everywhere are stepping out of shadows they thought were normal. You gave them a mirror. Rebecca shrugged. I didn't plan any of it. No, Gina said. You lived it. That's what made it real. Later that night, Rebecca sat alone on her balcony, the city humming below her. She scrolled through her messages, birthday wishes from coworkers, photos from a friend's baby shower, and a voicemail from her therapist reminding her of tomorrow's session. There were still moments where the ache returned. Memories. Christmases when she was 9, 10, 11, tucking her cousins into bed while the adults laughed over wine in the dining room. Birthday dinners canceled last minute because your sister's kids have a school play. That ache, it didn't go away entirely, but now she knew how to meet it with truth, not silence. In her next therapy session, Rebecca sat on the couch, legs folded beneath her, and said something she hadn't dared to before. "I don't think I ever had a family, just people who expected me to play a part." Her therapist looked at her gently. "And what part do you play now?" Rebecca smiled, eyes glistening. "Myself." Years from now, when she looked back, Rebecca wouldn't remember the court hearing first, or the viral post, or even the look on Debbie's face when she realized she'd finally lost control. She would remember walking into that house on Christmas morning, the scent of cinnamon, the blinking lights, the weight of wrapped gifts in her arms, and that tiny voice asking, "You're staying with us, right?" And how, for the first time in her life, she had said no and meant it.